fall off that. Very shaky. Good morning, everyone. Since I accidentally talked with my microphone on, I might as well say hi. Welcoming everyone into the room. It's so good to see everybody. It's especially good to see our Grace Covenant friends, some dear ones that we went to church with before we came here, came to visit. I'm just going to yell at you the whole time. How's that?
Good.
If I'm not loud enough, tell him in the back. Maybe he'll turn me up. Or if throughout this whole time, if you can't hear me, please just wave your arm. Don't tell me later you didn't hear anything I said, unless maybe that's what you're going for. Either way, welcome. Thank you so much for coming today. It's so good to see you all. I've got my family here to help me. So it happens to be the second Sunday, so that means that they're pouring coffee and stuff like that. So you'll think we took over your church. I told them earlier today, I said, this is the gay agenda. We come into your churches, preach the gospel, serve coffee, and Max even brought deviled eggs. So, you guys, you should be worried. Anyway, thank you so much for coming in. And Scotty's going to do the announcements for me.
Hey, so our announcements for today, prayers for all in our community. Some people we've got marked down here: Janet Raines and Christopher Wolf, Susan Bowling's sister and nephew, Lois Falconberry, Debbie Simmons, Jerry Crossnow and family, Bill Palmer, Emily Barnes' husband, Joe and Ann Deathridge, Michael Colin, Scott Hanley, Patty Sloan, Judy Ryland's cousin, Wanda Miller, Janie Miller's sister. We ask for continued prayers for Linda Crouch's grandson Perry, Doug Bean, Bud and Becky Blackwell, and for everybody in our community and the world that's suffering. The community soup supper will be this Wednesday at 5:30. The menu is turkey chili or vegetable soup, salad, bread, dessert. Come, bring friends. $5 suggested donation. RSVP to the church office if you're going to attend, so we know how many. And there won't be a Bible study or choir rehearsal. The donation focus for the food pantry this month is toilet paper and books. There's committee sign-up sheets in the fellowship hall. Please sign up for something. Especially announcing that it's Scout Appreciation Sunday, Sunday, February 23rd. We're inviting all the scouts to participate with us and be in attendance with their families. Plan to be here to help welcome and appreciate them and stay after for fellowship. Last call for Dollywood. We're considering a church day at Dollywood this spring. If you're interested, suggest a day. You can all go together. Check the newsletter for details. And if you're interested, let the office know. And the search committee will be holding private meetings for your concerns and comments. Already happened this morning and will continue when we finish the service until 1:30. If you'd like to meet with the search committee and you aren't here today, well, then you won't have heard this announcement. But you can, if you want to talk later, you can email the committee at nrfsearchcommittee@gmail.com or email comments that you have. So, thanks.
We gather again to listen to prophetic words.
Day after day,
We seek the Lord and delight to know God's ways. God sees us honestly, broken and lacking as we are.
But the Lord will still us.
Happy are those who seek the Lord. Their hearts are steady. They will not be afraid.
Let us lift up our hearts in praise and attention. Let us worship the Lord.
Amen.
Okay, will you join me in singing hymn 573, Lead On, Eternal Sovereign? I'm just going to stand down here. Get amongst you.
Psalm 112. Praise the Lord. Happy are those who fear the Lord, who greatly delight in his commandments. Their descendants will be mighty in the land. The generation of the upright will be blessed. Wealth and riches are in their houses, and their righteousness endures forever. They rise in the darkness as the light for the upright. They are gracious, merciful, and righteous. It is well with those who deal generously and lend, who conduct their affairs with justice. For the righteous will never be moved. They will be remembered forever. They are not afraid of evil tidings. Their hearts are firm, secure in the Lord. Their hearts are steady, they will not be afraid. In the end, they will look in triumph on their foes. They have distributed freely. They have given to the poor. Their righteousness endures forever. Their horn is exalted in honor. The wicked see it and are angry. They gnash their teeth and melt away. The desire of the wicked comes to nothing. Hear the words of the psalmist.
Thanks be to God. And now, Community of Christ, hymn number 314.
Yep, that's right.
We kind of got the dog and pony show going on here. I'm not usually leading the music, but I'm filling in for Susan and Rodney while they're gone, which we are delighted that they took some time off. We do miss them when they're gone, however. You ready, Dustin? Okay.
Hey there. I guess if you're going to run up here, I'm going to come up with a children's sermon real quick. Grayson, right? Yeah. Okay, I don't have a microphone for you. We have to talk in this whenever we talk. Okay. That's not awkward at all. So tell me something. Did you know I have kids? Did you know I have kids? That one over there, Max, is my daughter. And this one over here, that's Zoe. She's my daughter, too. So, I know you've met Max, huh? You know them. What do you think I would do, or how I would feel, if someone came up to me and was always just doing everything nice for me, always talking so kind to me and saying I'm great, and bringing me candy, and washing my dishes for me, and then they were just awful to my kids. They ignored them. They didn't bring them food when they brought me food. They acted like they weren't even people. How do you think I would feel about that person that was so nice to me? Not very joyful to them, no. Do you think I would feel like they loved me? Or did a very good job of loving me? No, because they're not loving my kids, right? Okay. Well, I think we're going to talk a little bit about that in the sermon I'm about to preach, which isn't just for the grown-ups. That's for kids too, okay? So that's the secret. They tell the kids the sermon for the grown-ups that aren't paying attention for the longer one later. But you can pay attention to the longer one later because you're smart enough to understand it all too, okay? Anyway, thank you. Can we pray together real quick? Okay. Jesus, thank you so much for kids that understand that we need to love each other and that we need to love your kids too. Thank you so much, Jesus. Amen. Thanks, Grayson. I'm stepping on my stool. All right. I was flying by the seat of my pants. Please join me in prayer. Oh God, thank you. Thank you that we can come together and be with family once again. Thank you so much that we have people who we can be ourselves with, people who care about us. God, I ask that you would be with those hurting in this community today. Be with those hurting throughout the world that are, especially those in Wuhan, China right now, who are cooped up and scared of the coronavirus. Lord, I ask that you would bless them, that you would heal them, that you would protect them, give them peace in a scary time. God, I ask that you would be with those migrants that are making it across treacherous terrain, not knowing if they'll be accepted, not knowing what they'll do if they have to go home. Be with those hungry folks within a mile of here that we pass every day, worried it might get cold, worried they might not be able to make the heat payment or buy groceries. God, help us to see these people that you love. Help us to treat your kids well. In your name I pray and ask you to join me for the prayers of the people. Say out loud the people on your heart so that we can join you in prayer. Lord, please be with Victoria.
Rodney and Susan.
Lord, hear our prayers. Please join us as Max leads us in the Lord's Prayer.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
Our reading from the prophets is Isaiah 58, verses 1 through 12. Shout it aloud, do not hold back. Raise your voice like a trumpet. Declare to my people their rebellion, and to the descendants of Jacob their sins. For day after day they seek me out. They seem eager to know my ways, as if they were a nation that does what is right and has not forsaken the commands of its God. They ask me for just decisions and seem eager for God to come near them. Why have we fasted, they say, and you have not seen it? Why have we humbled ourselves, and you have not noticed? Yet on the day of your fasting you do as you please and exploit all your workers. Your fasting ends in quarreling and strife and in striking each other with wicked fists. You cannot fast as you do today and expect your voice to be heard on high. Is this the kind of fast I have chosen? Only a day for people to humble themselves? Is it only for bowing one's head like a reed and for lying in sackcloth and ashes? Is that what you call a fast, a day acceptable to the Lord? Is this not the kind of fasting I have chosen? To loose the chains of injustice and untie the cords of the yoke? To set the oppressed free and break every yoke? Is it not to share your food with the hungry and to provide the poor wanderer with shelter? When you see the naked, to clothe them, and to not turn away from your own flesh and blood? Then your light will break forth like the dawn, and your healing will quickly appear. Then your righteousness will go before you, and the glory of the Lord will be your rear guard. Then you will call, and the Lord will answer. You will cry for help, and he will say, Here am I. If you do away with the yoke of oppression, with the pointing finger and malicious talk, and if you spend yourselves in behalf of the hungry and satisfy the needs of the oppressed, then your light will rise in the darkness, and your night will become like the noonday. The Lord will guide you always. He will satisfy your needs in a sun-scorched land, and he will strengthen your frame. You will be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose waters never fail. Your people will rebuild the ancient ruins and will raise up the age-old foundations. You will be called repairer of broken walls, restorer of streets with dwellings. Hear the words of the prophet.
When Egypt was in Israel's land, let my people go. Oppressed so hard they could not stand, let my people go. Oh, go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land. Tell old Pharaoh to let my people go. So Moses went to Egypt land, let my people go, to make old Pharaoh understand, let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land. Just tell old Pharaoh to let my people go. Thus spake the Lord, bold Moses said, let my people go. Freedom for all will take our stand, let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land. Tell old Pharaoh to let my people go.
Yes. All right, we can go home now. That was, thank you, Dustin. Thank you, Loy. I didn't pay attention, so I didn't know that was coming. That was so good. So, when Susan asked me to fill the pulpit today, she asked me a while back. And the first thing I did was look up the lectionary readings on my phone. Because I don't come from a background where you have certain texts that are preached every week. So I didn't grow up with that, and I didn't learn how to deal with that in seminary. We just got to say whatever we wanted to say. And so I always am a little suspicious, like, did they look ahead and find a really bad week, and that's the week they're going to go on vacation? And then they're going to ask me to preach that day? And so I was a little nervous, and then I looked, and I was like, Isaiah 58, jackpot. That's like one of my favorite. That's almost as good as Isaiah 61. And so I was very excited. Max was in the car with me, and I was like, wait, what did I preach about last time? Oh, feed the hungry, clothe the naked. They're going to think that's all I ever talk about. And then we looked at each other. We're like, oh, that is all I ever talk about. So I could very easily just slide over onto verse 6 today, because that's the exciting verse. We could get to the exciting part where we talk about breaking the bonds. You know, I like to break bonds, or at least tell other people to go do it while I sit at home looking at my phone. But I like to feed the hungry. We can all get on board with feeding the hungry. We can all say, yes, I'm going to donate to that cause. So it would be really fun if we could talk about that today. But no. That's what we talked about last time. But no, we don't get to be the hero in this passage, at least not yet today. We don't get to be the brave, speaking strength and truth to power prophet. We are not the prophet yet. No, we get to find out if we're the rebellious folks that Isaiah is supposed to be talking to. God tells Isaiah to announce to my people their rebellion. And we have to ask ourselves, are we the rebellious people? Are we the people following the religious steps, practicing righteousness, saying all the right things, seeming to delight in God's ways, having a national prayer breakfast and saying God bless America all the time? Or are we the people in verse 3 who God is talking to? And so I want to look at verse 3 with you, unfortunately. And it says in verse 3, they're asking, hey, they're doing all the right things. They're doing the things God told them to do, to fast as a big public organization. And they said, why have we fasted? And you have not seen it. Why have we humbled ourselves? And you haven't even noticed. And God says, yet on the day of your fasting, you do as you please, and you exploit all your workers. Oh, I don't exploit my workers. Do you guys exploit your workers? I think we exploit our workers, guys, because I've been looking into it, and title of my sermon, which I did not put anywhere because I did not come up with it until too late, is Who Are We Oppressing? And the question you might be asking is, what? Oppress my workers? I don't have any employees. What workers? Who are my workers? Or some of you might have employees and you think you're doing just fine by your employees. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. Who are my workers? You might notice that I'm not wearing a fancy suit and tie that I would love to be wearing on a Sunday morning, because that's just who I am. Because Max and I went to go find a new shirt to go with a tie that I thought would go with the stole, and it was going to cost a fortune, and it needed cufflinks, and we realized that did not go with my sermon at all. So I'm wearing work clothes because I want to signify to you all and to myself the worker that we need to be thinking about during this message, the worker that's mentioned in Isaiah 58, the worker that we're oppressing, and what God says about that. And it's not just in Isaiah 58 that we find God taking the side of the worker. We find that throughout the Hebrew scriptures, throughout the Christian scriptures. Malachi 3:5, the prophet says, God will be a swift witness against those who oppress the hired worker in his wages, the widow and the fatherless, against those who thrust aside the sojourner and do not fear me, says the Lord of hosts. Now, a lot of you are thinking maybe, well, I don't have any workers. And so this doesn't make sense. And some of you do, and they're like, okay, well, yeah, I guess I should be nicer to the guy. But actually, living in a capitalist consumer society is a bit different than what they had back then. You see, any person who does the work that you're paying for, that provides for the goods or services that you're enjoying, they're your worker. Unfortunately, that's the case in this society, and there's nothing we can do about it. And you might not write their paycheck, and you might not even know what they look like, but they're your worker. And so we need to ask ourselves, how am I treating my workers? So this could be easy. Say if I hire a lawn service. I hire a lawn service, they send a guy, he mows my yard, I pay the lawn service, they pay the guy. Okay, I can get it, yeah, he's my worker. It's a little removed, but it makes sense. Or if I wanted to save money, I might hire an undocumented worker to do my yard work. Then maybe I could pay them a little bit less. Or then maybe I could pay them later. Or maybe I could pay them not at all, and there's nothing they could do about it, because what could they do if I call ICE? And so then we can really see, whoa, that's bad. You're mistreating your worker right there. And obviously, we don't need a scripture for that, but we have some, of course. James 5:4 says, "Behold, the wages of the laborers who mow your fields, which you keep back by fraud. They're crying against you, and the cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord of hosts." So yes, we can all agree. Don't take advantage of people. Don't be mean to your workers. Deuteronomy 24:14-15 says, "You should not oppress a hired servant who is poor and needy, whether he is one of your brothers or one of the sojourners." A sojourner would be a traveler. A sojourner would be an immigrant. A sojourner is someone who ain't from here, okay? That's who a sojourner is, and that's who keeps popping up in all these verses, the sojourners. The sojourners who are in your land and within your towns. You shall give him his wages on the same day before the sun sets, for he is poor, and he counts on it, lest he cry against you to the Lord, and you be guilty of sin. I think that's pretty easy to understand. We can figure that out. And then we can take that a little bit further and think about other workers that maybe aren't on our payroll, but they're working for us. For example, a waiter. They don't get paid much. If you don't tip the waiter because you didn't really like the way your steak was seasoned, are you mistreating a worker? Are you sending them home with less money than they needed to provide for their families, for the work that they did? Pizza delivery guy. If you order a pizza in the middle of an ice storm and the teenager brings you your pizza and you forget to tip, are you mistreating this guy? Yes, you really, really are. You're taking advantage of their labor for yourself. And that's not something you needed to do. That's something you choose to do. The hotel maid. Leave a tip. Or just don't destroy the place. These are all, we can see this next step. These people are our workers. Some of them have faces and we can see them and we can understand that. But then things get more complicated. There are other things that aren't as obvious. So many commodities become a part of the background of our lives. It's these commodities that they're just everyday things that we use and don't even think about. We don't think about where they come. We think they magically appear at the grocery store or something. Like coffee. And I think most commodities, when they become something that's just traded back and forth across the world for profit, that's where you're going to find oppression. That's where you're going to find people who are oppressed, and that's been the case for centuries. The second most traded commodity in the world is, Loy was right, coffee. Coffee is just slightly less than crude oil, because coffee is what keeps us all going, okay? We have 2.25 billion cups of coffee consumed worldwide on a daily basis. This has been going on for centuries. For many people across the world, coffee isn't something they think about. It's just something they drink every morning to get through the day, and no thought is given to where it came from. Now, if you know me, or as you get to know me, or by the end of the service, you will know that I am obsessed with coffee. I have been obsessed with coffee for 25 years. I did not prepare the sermon I wanted to because I got distracted reading about coffee for over a month. So you'll notice when we get to the end, I'm going to be winging it because I know a lot more about coffee than I did before. So I'm obsessed about coffee. Max is like, yep, this happened. I watched this happen. And Max has been along this journey with me. When they were 2 years old, they were making me coffee. Okay, when they were 3 years old, they were stealing my coffee. Stealing it. I didn't realize that very sneakily, Max would open the sippy cup, pour a little of my coffee in with the chocolate milk, only a little at a time, so I wouldn't notice, because she's very smart, and then would put the lid back on, and I did not notice until I got a hug from Max that had coffee breath attached, and then I realized Max has been stealing my coffee for a very long time, and I had to start keeping it higher, like up on the top shelf, or on the mantle, somewhere where a 3-year-old couldn't reach it. This is when I stopped putting milk in my coffee, because I would leave it there, and then I would forget which cup is today's cup, and I had some bad experiences. So now I drink my coffee black. But Max has been doing this with me, and we collect coffee makers. How many do we have? Okay, they're all cool. We do not have a regular drip coffee maker. Not cool. And so we roast our own coffee. I mean, yes, we're not obsessed, we're hobbyists. Hobbyists. When the coffee roaster dies, we frantically find a popcorn popper and a dowel rod and a wrench and turn it into a coffee roaster because things have to be done. When Max stopped being able to have caffeine, we bought 20 pounds of green decaf coffee beans so that we can roast because a child can't go without good coffee. So you'll understand, everybody understands now, this is not my first coffee sermon, okay? So you might now get why my new stole is what it is. So I finally bought a stole because in our tradition we don't have stoles, and so I had to borrow one last time, and Susan is way taller than me. So I got one, and it's made out of recycled coffee sack, the burlap sack from Brazil, a coffee shop, and it says, "Do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with your God." And as we were discussing that I was going to buy this and how much is it going to cost, with my mom and my sisters in a group chat, Scotty said, "But it's perfect for Amy." And she said, "And the regular pastors, they have a different stole for each season. But for Amy, it's always coffee and justice season." And I felt more loved and understood than I ever have. But unfortunately, coffee and justice don't usually grow together. They never have grown together, or at least not for a very, very long time. We know that sugar started the slave trade. Sugar is what got it all revved up and going and organized, and coffee came right afterwards. Right afterwards. And South American history, which I know more about in the last month than I've ever known, because again, I'm obsessed. South American history is a story of colonialism, slavery, and coffee. And while coffee helped fuel the Industrial Revolution, in Europe, people were getting together at this coffee shop for this kind of thought and processes and getting together over here for this one to find out where the ships are going and this thing. And they're all fueled by this caffeine and starting an industrial revolution. Meanwhile, in South America, enslaved Africans and indigenous peoples were dying to provide this coffee to serve Europe and this growing demand for caffeine. And of course, it's continued to grow. As we see, it's still one of the biggest commodities. And when coffee becomes a commodity, people get oppressed. And we have a big crisis in coffee right now, actually. It's a really big crisis. For a while, during the Cold War, there was a special agreement that coffee will always be at least this price. And the plan was that way we'll keep the people in the coffee-growing nations happy, and they won't become upset or unrest. There won't be any unrest, and they won't go to the communists. Well, after the Cold War was over, we don't care about that. We want cheap coffee. You know, we're always planning ahead like that. and so the coffee prices plummeted, the commodity coffee prices. So much so, and even now so much so, it's less than $1 per pound of coffee for the commodity coffee. That is not what you pay at the grocery store. That is not how much it costs to make coffee. So small growers, medium-sized growers, they spend more to make the coffee and to grow the coffee than they get paid at the end of the year for that coffee. But they don't have another choice, because in so many areas like Guatemala, your choices are grow coffee or move, migrate or grow coffee. That's just the only option there because of the terrain. In some places, they have to also decide or grow drugs, something like that. That'll pay the bills, but it's not good either. And so, especially in Guatemala, there's just not enough money being made for the individual farmers. And we're not talking easy jobs either. We're talking individual people picking individual beans. It can take up to 160 individual beans for your cup of coffee, and they're being picked one by one, one by one, one by one, on the side of a mountain, in the rain, in the heat, one by one, one by one. They have to, so many of these places that produce our coffee have forced child labor. The kids aren't going to school. They're not playing. They're picking coffee all day long, one by one, one by one. And as climate changes, it's getting warmer and they're getting less rain. They're having to move up higher because the altitude is just right to make the coffee. And so they have to keep moving up higher to where it's harder. And they're having coffee rust, which is a thing that just destroys the coffee. And so they have to use lots more chemicals to keep the coffee from dying. Well, those chemicals, of course, are not good for kids. They're not good for the workers. And they're expensive. And so it costs more to make the coffee, but the prices of coffee keep going down because of the commodity. In Brazil, they can have big machines that will just get it all, and so they can get a really, really cheap price for their coffee. In Brazil, they can pay their workers a bit more because it's rich in comparison. And so as those prices go down, you've got people in Guatemala or in El Salvador who can't make it by. Also, because of this, you've got a lot of forced labor. You've got a lot of basically the same as slavery kind of situations where you owe the company's store, you have you have debt to the store, so you have to keep working there, or they take your papers, they promise you something, a different job, and then you get there, and now you're picking coffee. So, as you can see, this is upsetting to me because these are people. These are human beings. And when I order my coffee, green coffee beans online, I'm ordering from individual estates. And so I'm seeing the pictures of the people who are picking the coffee, one by one, one by one. And I'm seeing the pictures of their kids. In one place, it's the only place in the world they do this for some reason, instead of raking the coffee back and forth to get the coffee cherry off and the husks off, the teenagers come with boom boxes, old style, turn on the radio, and they stomp the coffee like it were grapes, like they were making wine. And I have a picture of all their feet covered in the coffee things, because it was an interesting thing for the coffee seller to take a picture and just think, this is a different, unique way they're doing it. But for me, I see those little feet, and I realize these are people. These are human beings. These are not commodities. These are people made in the image of God. And these are your workers. And I get to see the pictures of the happy workers because I buy the happy coffee. And so, another thing with the crisis, the coffee crisis in South America, is, okay, they're not making the money. Farming anymore isn't working, so they move to the big cities to get a job. They move to the big cities, there's not jobs. There's crime, there's drugs, there's gangs. So then what do they move? They move 2,000 miles north. And then they get stuck at the border. The people who come the most to our border are the Guatemalans, the ones I told you about, the ones who can't make ends meet growing coffee anymore. So our workers are now at our borders because we weren't paying enough for their work. In Brazil, they might get paid $4.65 a month. In El Salvador, if they get paid, there's a lot of slavery involved as well, they might make $120 a month doing their picking. And those are the ones that are getting paid. So what can you do? I mean, come on, they're just people on the other side of the world. Picking coffee, picking sugar, picking cotton, getting ore out of the ground. What can we do? Well, you pointed out my coffee here. It's a lot easier on the coffee thing now than it used to be because you can just go to Weigel's and buy ethically sourced coffee if you just look more carefully at the little sections there. And so this is Rainforest Fancy Nicaraguan coffee for $1.50. But the main thing you can do is be aware. Don't buy the commodity coffee or the commodity blank. Think about these workers. You can go and buy specialty coffees. Pay attention. Is it fair trade? Is it really fair trade, or is that just kind of a label that they're using to sell it? You can ask places to serve coffee that's ethically sourced. Because honestly, do you want some slave labor in a cup of joe in the morning? I find it messes up the taste. I don't know. You can make, if you're passionate about it, which I don't know if that many people are going to be as passionate about this as I am, you can make Kiva loans to small growers to help them buy the things they need to make their farms more productive. And so instead of having to pack up and move somewhere they're not welcome, they can make their farm grow and provide jobs to others. For a few $1,000s or a few $100s, a Kiva loan is where you just pitch in a little and everybody goes in together. You can welcome the immigrant, something we could think of. You could look up the Sweat and Toil app on your phone, something the government made, and it tells you every product from every country. You can look up, oh, I wonder if this rice is okay. And then you go to rice, and you're like, oh, no, in Thailand it's fine, but in this country, it's got forced labor and child labor involved. If you know, then you know. So maybe you should know. It's not just coffee. It's also chocolate. You're welcome. Valentine's Day is coming, and I want you all to give your loved ones slave labor chocolate. Yes, because, you know, that's what we do for Valentine's Day. We show people we love them. And I know a lot of times the ethically sourced chocolate is expensive. And so it's hard to pay a couple extra bucks for a bar of chocolate. We have a lot of expenses. So, you know, it makes sense to ask some little kid on the other side of the country to pay for that with their labor all day so that our chocolate can be cheaper. You know, I don't want to pay $3, so maybe some little kid on the other side of the world could work for a day for me and skip school so that my chocolate's cheaper or it tastes right. I'm being sarcastic because it makes me angry. And it makes me angry when I'm the one that does it. It makes me angry when I'm the one that buys the chocolate chips because we want chocolate chip cookies, and I know that that's a source that company cannot say they're not using forced child labor. But we live here, and there's so many things. There's so many things we buy. We can't know where everything comes from. So I don't know how to handle that, besides the fact that there are some things we do know, and we should do something about those things. So this has been a very cheerful sermon. There's really great coffee available, by the way, and we'll bring you some if you'd like. Not everybody, it's a lot. What I want you to do is think about who are your workers. Who are your workers? Is that just somebody at Walmart that you just are telling off because they're not helping you with the machine when you're trying to do the self-checkout and you had to wait too long? Is it the worker that you didn't tip when maybe they needed it more than you? And it's not about whether we think we should have to tip. That's just how our society is. Those are the people that are being hurt by that. So, guess what I'm asking you to do? Go online look up some pictures of coffee growers and look them in the eye and look at their children. And I want you to go to Lowe's and see those undocumented workers looking for a job for the day. And look at them, and I want you to see Jesus, because that's who they are. Because what we do for the least of these is what we do for Jesus. And as Isaiah 58 talks about, what is the true fast? What is true religion? I left my notes over here, but I'll read that section real quick. It's the part that I wanted to go with. Verse 6, is not this the kind of fast I have chosen, to loose the chains of injustice and untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free and break every yoke? Is it not to share your food with the hungry and to provide the poor wanderer with shelter, when you see the naked, to clothe them and not to turn away from your own flesh and blood? Look at these people, see the image of God in them, and then worship God by loving them.
Thank you, Amy, for that good lesson. When we know better, we can do better. And I appreciate what you had to say. Also, if you let us know your website for checking out, you know, cruelty-free products, or that's not quite the right name, but we can put it in the bulletin or something. And so when we know better, we can do better. And we thank you for your teaching. Yeah. Oh, we're a wonderful group, aren't we? We are. I'm so proud to Thank you all for your service, what you do for us. Thank you. We're delighted to have you and hope you'll come back to join us. I had my canned goods out at the door. The scouts have been collecting, and it was Saturday morning, and I was doing the dishes. I saw a little streak go by, and I saw it go right back by, and I was like, oh, they got that. And I ran to the door, and I opened it up, and I said, thank you, children, thank you. We love you, we love you. But we live in a community where children scour the streets and get the canned goods and take it to the food pantry or wherever, take it to fill the stomachs of the people who don't have what we have. And I just can be proud of you scouts and the things that you do for our community and for our world, and we applaud you for that. Thank you. Okay, my sermon's over. This is, the tune we're going to sing now is Oh God Come Sunday Morning. It's in your insert, and it's a tune, Stand Up for Jesus, so I guess we better stand up. Yeah.
God, as we go, keep us from dry, brittle religion, from rigid laws and cold judgments, from personal piety and aloof disinterest in the well-being of others. Teach us the way of our true faith. Pray. Keep us, O God, from empty, lifeless ritual, from babbled liturgies and noisy songs, from Sunday worship that has nothing to say to Monday's world. Teach us the way of true faith, O God, we pray. Keep us, O God, from proud, self-interested practices, from approval-seeking prayers and manipulative fasting, from faith that would demand blessing at the expense of the weakest and the poorest. Teach us the way of true faith, O God, we pray. May we be those whose lives reflect our love for you, our commitment to bring joy and justice to all, and our embrace of the cross as we do so. May we be those who fast truly and pray with integrity, whose worship overflows into compassion and service, and through whom our world becomes a little more whole. Amen.